course, on your shower, you know exactly where to stick the temperature dial so that it's the right temperature water for how you like it. But sometimes you have to go to a friend's house where you're staying over, or you're on holiday, or you're in a hotel or a caravan or something, and all of a sudden you're faced with an unfamiliar temperature dial. And you have to do that kind of shower dance where you reach over and you crank it round to where you think it should be, similar to where it is on your shower at home, only that's far too hot, scalding hot, scalding hot, scalding hot. So you turn it down a little bit, but of course it's far too sensitive a dial, and so that makes it freezing, freezing cold. And you have to reach through without getting too cold and try and make it hotter. Then you overcorrect. And at some point in this dance of correction and overcorrection and trying to find the sweet spot, you find the right temperature. And it's all about adjusting and readjusting to find the sweet spot. As we carry on looking at different stories that the doctor Luke tells us about Jesus, this week we're in Luke chapter 10, and we're noticing this little story, a quick story that happens that Luke tells us about Jesus going to somebody's house. In fact, he goes to the house of two sisters, Mary and Martha. This isn't the only time Mary and Martha appear in and have central roles in different stories about Jesus, and it isn't the only time Jesus goes to their village. But on this occasion, Jesus has arrived and he's expecting, I guess, a meal, a lunch, a dinner, nobody knows. But the thing you've got to know when Jesus turns up to your house, I mean, it's like any guest, it's like any unexpected guest. You have to quickly whiz round and throw some of the clutter from your house underneath the sofa or put it behind a curtain. Pick up some of the coffee mugs that you've been meaning to pick up for the last few days. You have to quickly boil the kettle. You have to check, have I got tea bags? I don't know. You have to find, if you're catering for Jesus, it turns out he doesn't travel alone. He comes with at least 12 mates and probably some other people and probably some local busybodies who want to see what's going on, and maybe a local press photographer. There's a whole bunch of people that arrive at your house all of a sudden, and so it's not only you've got a clear bunch of stuff, you've got to find all the emergency mugs. And have you got a jug big enough to put a drink in for all of these guests? And so, whilst Jesus arrives at the home of Mary and Martha, we watch as the two sisters have quite different but both good responses to Jesus' presence. Martha dives into the kitchen. She's aware all of a sudden of all the preparations that need to be made. She knows that she's got to do a bit of clearing up. She knows that she's suddenly got to put the kettle on. She knows that somewhere in the back of the cupboard there's some flour and she can quickly whip up some really nice cupcakes. She wants to practice the ancient holy spiritual act of hospitality. She wants to show care and attention to and for her guests. She loves these guests. She's delighted that they're in her house and she wants to serve them well. So she gets stuck into all the preparations that made. She's washing things up, she's making things, she's cooking things, she's preparing, she's making sure everyone's got a seat, she's probably moving conversation on a little bit, asking questions and making sure everybody's okay. Her sister Mary, she doesn't bother with any of that. She just sits next to Jesus. She has questions. She wants to know about some of the things that he's been up to. She has stories that she's heard on the grapevine of things that he's done, things that he's said, miracles that have surrounded him, odd things that have happened in his presence. She wants to ask. She wants to hear the things that he has to say. And it isn't like he's a walking packet of fortune cookies that just comes out with wise, pithy sayings. It's that he's funny, it's that he's entertaining, it's that she likes him, it's that he's a friend and she wants to talk to him. Eventually, her sister Martha has had enough. The passive aggression turns into aggression and she storms into the front room and she's like, Jesus, would you let me take my sister for a moment? Because she hasn't lifted a single finger to help and I could do with her in the kitchen if that's all right with you. And Jesus calmly says to Martha, you know what? You're going to have the kitchen tomorrow and the next day and the next day. I'm not going to be here all of those days. She's chosen a really good thing. And because of that, sometimes I think Martha gets a bad rap. Sometimes I think we all look at Martha and go, imagine Jesus turning up to your house. I'm not going to sit and listen to him. But she was doing something beautiful and brilliant. She was involved in action. She wanted to show love through the work and the activity and the participation of her hands, of her body. She wanted to serve. She wanted to be hospitable. She cared, and she wanted to show that through hospitality and through preparing a feast for the table, at least some sandwiches. It isn't that she was doing something bad. She was involved in action, in activity, in work. That was her expression of love towards Christ. It just happened that her sister Mary, she also wants to show love. She also wants to show adoration. She also cares passionately about adoring this man in front of her. And her way of showing that, if you like, if we were to stretch it a little bit, is through quiet. It's through inactivity, it's through contemplation, it's through listening, it's through thinking on the words that the teacher speaks. And it doesn't take many gymnastic somersaults for us mentally to begin to see how this might be at play in our lives. Maybe there's an invitation to overcorrect, to recorrect, to readjust the temperature gauge in our spiritual lives sometimes. Because even though there's two sisters, I find myself, my character has elements of both of them. Or there are seasons of my life when I can be more like either of them. Sometimes I'm involved in activity. I'm doing the work of God. I'm doing holy stuff. I'm prophetically battling injustice. I have my fingers dirty in the action of holy work. I'm doing God's work for him. And I'm active, and I'm involved, and I'm busy, and I'm go, go, go. Other times, maybe I withdraw. Maybe I sense the need for contemplation. Maybe my soul and my mind is whirring and running at too many revs, and I need to calm down. Maybe I've been so involved in activity I haven't heard any words from the Master for a while, and I need to readjust one way or the other. So maybe this weekend, gang, as we've had our bonfire party and we've got some space carved out into our Sunday, maybe there's an invitation to just question, have we been running too hot for a little while? Have we been running too cold for a little while? Do we need to readjust? Have you been involved in too much activity for God? Have you been involved in too many things that you're doing? Is your place always to be found with your up to your elbows in work and action? Maybe there's an invitation to readjust towards quiet and contemplation and listening and just enjoying the presence of Jesus. Maybe there's a challenge for others of us who've been enjoying the presence of Jesus, thank you very much, behind closed doors all the time. And actually it's an invitation to activity, and there's an invitation to involvement, and there's an invitation to work and participation and being involved with the work of justice and love and faith and peace. And maybe there's a third invitation to some of us who haven't really been involved in either, and it's time to get under the water. Mary, this same Mary who listens to Jesus, well, she's the same Mary a little while later. We're going to meet her in an incredible moment where just before his death, when nobody else is going to anoint his body with any oils that would be ordinary for burial, well, Mary's going to bust into a party that she's not invited to, and she's going to weep over her friend, and she's going to dry his feet with her hair because they're wet with her tears, and she's going to anoint him with incredibly expensive oil. It isn't that worship is passive. That's one of the most involved acts of worship that ever gets recorded. Worship isn't passive. Worship isn't just activity. Discipleship of Jesus is both and. To experiencing the invitation to the quiet contemplation and to the listening to the words of the Master, and to being involved in the great adventure of Jesus' work. As you readjust, as you experience the blessing of both, may you know the presence and the joy of Jesus in you, around you, through you, and upon all whom you love.